All right, well, welcome in for another Technique Tuesday. And this time we're going to be working with some tissue paper. I have a lot of this in stock. I have it for sale in my shop. And it comes in 20 by 26 inch sheets. So they're nice and large sheets. And this is the type of tissue paper that does not bleed. So if you got a color of it, you would not want to get something that bleeds. And it comes in 40 sheets. It has a kind of a satin side to it and a matte side to it. And I like to work with the matte side. You figure out what works best for you. So I'm going to be working with a variety of techniques on this tissue paper with foam stamps. Now these can be foam stamps that you've purchased, or it could be foam stamps that you make yourself. And these are really easy to make. All you need is some craft foam that is adhesive on one side and not as thick, and then some that is thicker that is non-adhesive. And then you just draw out your designs, cut them out, and glue them on whatever backer. You do not have to do them as big as I've done here. You can cut them down individually. I'm trying to see if I have any that are smaller. You can put them on both sides, so you don't have to be limited to just having designs on one side. The neat thing about making your own is you can even draw designs into the final piece, and that will show up, those embossed areas that you do. So that is kind of what we're going to go over today. So the first one that I'm going to show you is simply using archival inks. So I have a variety of archival inks. This way, if you decide to spray some color in the background or do something more, or they were to get wet, they're not going to bleed on you. If you want bleeding, then we can use a water soluble medium in the background. So I'm just going to pull out a large variety of my archival inks, and that way we have choices that we can make, and just start doing some stamping in the background. These sheets can be used, you can cut out images to make focal points. The nice thing about having the tissue in the background, they kind of blend in and get lost. You can put them down as a background. You have lots of choices. So I'm going to start off with this circular design, and I'm going to come in with this hickory smoke, which is like a dark gray, and I'm simply going to dab that right on my foam stamp. Later on, we're going to look at other mediums doing the same technique, but we're going to start off with archival ink. And you simply press down. You don't want to wait too long. You don't want that to dry on the surface of your stamp. And you can get second generation impressions, third, fourth. You just can keep going on and on until you get a variety of dark values on that. And you can see that last one is very hard to see. But I like to work on the sheet as a whole, and I like to choose work with one stamp, one foam stamp at a time. Because I like to work in the rule of thirds and create kind of triangles. So 1, 2, 3, and then stamp off the last few times. Kind of come in like that. You can use this tissue paper to wrap presents in. You have so many options. So this is kind of like this is from Art Foamies. This one was as well. I think I'm gonna use speckled egg. And you're gonna see that this does go through, so you're gonna wanna have something on your surface to protect your surface. And then I'm gonna do this. Now this has two different greens and reds. Now if you're using this as wrapping paper, you're gonna definitely want to grab a couple of white pieces to put behind it, or you're gonna see your gift through. There we go. And now we have some nice decorative tissue that can be used as backgrounds. This is more like a motif that could be used for wrapping gifts, but that gives you an idea of one technique for creating with tissue paper.
All right, so now we're going to come in with another piece of tissue paper, and we're going to use a variety of foam stamps and create an all over background. So I'm going to still continue to use the archival inks, and I'm going to use two different patterns in the large handmade stamps that I've created, and then come in with an alternative and do random stamping throughout the whole sheet with a third foamy. This gives you some really nice backgrounds that you could use. You could rip it out, use it as a background, and then come in and collage over that, or you rip it up smaller and use it as collage fodder. Another alternative is you can come in again with some art sprays and use that if you choose. But just remember, when you're using tissue and you're going to use when you're going in with sprays, you need to make sure, how am I going to end up being using this, and is it okay if what I put on is water soluble? Because many of the sprays out there are water soluble. And here I'm coming in with this text art foamy stamp, and I am inking it up with a ground espresso. So a color I felt would be a good neutral, and I am random stamping all over the sheet that I've already done all the stamping onto. And for our next sheet, I am going to start off with first spraying onto it. I am spraying on it with some of the Distress Oxide sprays. So these are water soluble. One way that I can overcome that from it moving too much, it'll still move a little bit if like if you want to use this as collage fodder and you add anything liquid to it, but you can use a matte fixative. And so I usually spray this down with matte fixative, and I give it a couple sprays, let it dry completely before you move the tissue, because the tissue, you don't want it to rip, etc. So that is what I usually do.
All right, for this next technique, we are going to use foam stamps again, and this time we're going to use acrylic paint. Now, I prefer to use a small gel plate. So this is a 3x5 gel plate and a brayer to move that spread out onto the gel plate smoothly, flat, so that I can use it as my stamp pad for my foam stamps. You don't want to ever use your brayer onto tissue paper unless you are really holding it down and you go in one direction. So hold here, go away from you, and don't draw it back towards you, or you'll get the tissue wrapped up inside your brayer. But for this, I'm not going to be using that. I'm just going to be using it on my gel plate. You don't need a lot of paint. And you're gonna just get it rolled out till it's smooth, kind of as best as you can, an even layer. And then any excess, you can either roll off onto your back paper, your under paper, or you can roll it off onto a scrap piece of paper. And then we're gonna just take our foam stamp and we're gonna come directly into the gel plate and get the paint onto that foam. Now, something you're gonna wanna keep in mind is that you are going to want to clean your foam stamps with a soft brush. I find works really well, like an old soft toothbrush. Works very nicely. I got a piece of fuzz. There we go. To take that paint off of the foam stamp. Over time, if you don't clean your foam stamp, paint is going to really get in there, and as it dries, it's an acrylic, so it becomes plastic and very challenging to remove. And I'm just going to do some random stamping again in threes or uneven numbers in triangular kind of shapes, just all over the background until this paint is gone. The neat thing about it is these do float. So if I have my paint water over here, I can just let it sit there in the paint water, which is I just cleaned. So it'll stay soft, so I can come back and wash that up even though I'm in the midst of this. Okay. So now I'm going to come on with a different color. All right, well, the next set of tissue techniques that I'm going to show you, still using the same tissue paper. I do have some samples to show you, showing you some alternatives from using this tissue. But you can see how large this is. This is really fun to work with. Sometimes I'll cut it, like when I'm gel printing, I'll cut this tissue in half and then use my very oversized gel plate, and I will be able to print like that much on it. So it's really fun to use this tissue paper, and it's very hardy. You can do a lot with it. So we are going to review a couple of techniques, similar techniques to this, where you use tissue with fabric. So this one is tissue with cheesecloth or gauze. It's the wide cheesecloth, more like gauze. And so this is a sample of that where I used tissue paper. So this is this tissue paper cut where I ripped it, and then I ripped up some rice paper. So I'm going to show you a variation of this using this tissue paper and color, and we're going to add color instead of adding this. Now the thing that this does is this gives it some sturdiness. It's very sturdy. It can be used as a book cover. It is really fun to work with. You can still collage with it. So that's what I'm going to show next on another technique within the whole tissue technique. Okay, so you're going to need a couple of supplies. You need some kind of plastic. Now, these are those plastic cutting boards. They have a shiny side and a dull side. So you want to do this on the shiny side. I'll have everything listed below as usual. Okay, so you'll want some of these. I have them, I use them for lots of different types of projects. And you are gonna want some, this is really inexpensive cheesecloth from the dollar store. And you wanna cut it just slightly smaller than this cutting mat. And then you're going to want to open it up fully so it's one layer. And again, I'm going to cut it slightly smaller. And it doesn't need to be pretty, it just needs to be cut. I'm not going to worry about this excess. I can move it in, I can trim it later, or just leave it hanging. That could be fun too. And then I have cut down a piece of the tissue paper to fit this basic size. So we're going to start with the shiny side up, and then we're going to add our tissue paper. So the first thing, you can use a watered down PVA. You can use matte gel medium that's watered down, or just go with the fluid medium. I like to use the fluid medium. So I'm going to start with that, and I am going to lay some down on, gets a little thick. Maybe it's just having a hard time coming out. It's been a while since I've used it. I'm going to give it a little help, add a little water. If yours is nice and thin, you don't need to worry about this part. And then I'm going to get, this is just I'll list it down below. There's a 3-pack, I think, of these Blick Essentials, but you could even use just a chip brush. Chip brushes are usually really bristly, and so they'll give you some texture in the background. If you don't like that, then use something else. And we're just going to smooth this out over this whole surface. And as you do that, that water will just mix right in. We want it, the reason why we want it pretty thin is because we need it to stay wet for a bit, so we have some workability. All right, and then the next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna lay our tissue over this. Do not worry about wrinkles. Do not worry about any excess that goes over the sides. That's the beauty of creating this type of collage fodder. And then I'm gonna just brush over that, get the air bubbles out. So I've ripped some here, that is fine. I'm gonna try and pull it out a little bit, but I am not gonna be too concerned. I let my brush get a little dry. As you can see, this tissue is pretty hardy. It only really ripped there and there. Oh, there's a little piece there. If you kept your brush wetter or the surface more moist, that wouldn't happen. So now I'm going to come over with a thinner layer. And some water. Being very careful not to rip it too much. We like the ripping. It's something different and it'll look cool in the end. Because then we're going to come in with our cheesecloth. And this is something I've been doing for a really long time. I don't know if you've seen some of my, I'll use it as background pieces for focals. So I'm going to go over it again with some fluid medium and again with some water. And I'm just going to get this spread out a little bit. It doesn't need to be precise and it doesn't have to be thick and it doesn't have to cover it all. Now I have some excess tissue from when I cut this down, and if I wanted to, I could add pieces in different areas. I like to wrinkle it up. Add a little bit of extra glue, and then add it to the top and just go over it. You can do that. Again, you can use tissue paper. I suggest you stay away from tissue paper that bleeds unless you're wanting that. But then remember, when you go to add it to a project, if it gets wet, it's going to bleed again. So not really worried about that coming up, because now we're going to add some color to this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to come in with some, just because I've been wanting to experiment with this, and I think this is a good opportunity since I'm making some more for my stash, is I'm gonna, and I haven't done it yet, I want to try some of the Dina Wakley gloss sprays. So, of course, my glossy gloss sprays are not in spray bottles any longer. I have moved them into these drip bottles, which makes it perfect for something like this. So even with this wet, I'm going to come in and I'm going to dribble some of this on here. Again, this is collage fodder. It doesn't need to be precise. And I'm going to come in with some really brights. And I'm going to start with my, next I'm going to start with my darker colors and go lighter. When I transferred them to these bottles, I did leave the BB in it so that they can be shaken up, because you need to make sure you shake them really well before you use them. Okay. Now you can drag a paintbrush through this if you want. You can tip it to get it to move and pool in different areas. The next part is the hardest part. You have to let this sit and dry. And I have found that it does a lot better if it dries naturally. So I'm going to show you, once that is dry, you're going to have a matte surface. So this is the surface that was to the top, and then a glossier surface, and that's the surface that was to the bottom. Now I learned with this one that, I didn't do the tissue first. I should have done my collage work first. It was a lot harder to get up with the cheesecloth to the surface of the plastic carrier that I used. You'll want a flat surface to leave this to dry. And then once it's dry, I'm going to show you how to pull them up. All right, so this is a sample of one that I did using a tissue paper, wrapping paper. This is kind of like, you can get pre-printed tissue paper. So I was using some of that, and I have a real dark one and I had a lighter one, and then I put it on some muslin. So this is like a burp cloth that I cut off the sewn edges, and it comes apart like in 6 thin layers. So a very thin fabric. So I laid the tissue down. I remembered to lay it down backwards, so the print was backwards when I was looking at it. So it was laid down like this. And then I did the same thing. I used the fluid medium, laid the tissue down upside down like this, and then fluid medium, and then I laid the fabric over. This is thicker than the other. You can still rip it, so it's thin enough that you can still rip it and get a lot of the qualities of fabric, but have this print on it. This one I did not add paint to, so that is an option. So basically this exact same thing, just using a different type of fabric. This is where I took some colored fabric. This I discovered is a bleedable fabric. This I did very large. I actually used 2 of these to do it on. It was very challenging. I don't suggest that you do that. It was kind of hard to get dry. It was very drippy, hung over the edges. And on this, I used this tissue that kind of did have some bleeding qualities. I did rip it up, as you can see, and overlapped it. And then I used this is a sheet, an old sheet. And you can see how the tissue bled into the sheet. Again, I used the sheet down on the plastic and instead of the tissue. That was a little challenging. It did curl a lot, and I think that was because I wasn't able to get the whole thing stuck down onto the plastic sheet. So, I suggest you keep to the basic size of your sheet so you don't have a lot of this. But like I said, this is sheeting, a sheet, and it still has that same ability to be ripped, just like cloth. And I just left it with this. I think this would be a beautiful journal cover. Still have a lot of the qualities of fabric and the strength, but still be malleable. And the paper you could even add more paint onto this. It would be a lot of fun. Or even for collage fodder. I use it mostly for collage fodder. So that's another option. Next one, I'm going to show you how I did this, but I'm going to use white tissue. So this is a printed tissue. I'm trying to think if this was think this was just printed tissue. Yeah. And I used burlap. So this was a lot of fun. I put on this one again, I put the fabric down first and then did the tissue on top. I would do that differently now, and I'll show you that. So what we're going to do this time is we're going to use the white tissue and some burlap, and we're going to add our own color to it. This is so much fun. I will add in a little video here of how I have used this. I think I have some footage of using this material in pieces of art that I do. It really lends itself well. It's harder to rip, but it can be ripped. But it's a lot harder because the burlap is strong and it's now got glue in it. So, but I love all these strands that have little bits of the tissue on it. I think that's a lot of fun. So there's a lot that can be said for this. So that's what we're gonna do next. So glossy side up. Let's see what size burlap I have. Hold on just a moment. Okay, well, it turns out I have more burlap than I thought. So I do sell this in my shop as well. This is very clean. It's from Burlap Bags. Now, if you wanted your color on the tissue side, you can always lay your tissue down and then add color to it and then add the burlap. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to add paint onto one side underneath the burlap, and then we'll do some on the top so you can see the difference. Okay, so I have a container. I'm going to add some yellow ochre to it. We don't need a lot because we are going to add water.
So we're going to do the same sandwich. So it's the fluid matte medium, the tissue paper, fluid matte medium, the burlap, and fluid matte medium, and in between there we're adding that color. So we added a little bit of color between the tissue and the burlap on the left hand side, and now I'm coming in and adding the color on top of the burlap.
Now I'm not going to water this down. I just want something to really act as an adhesive initially, because we are going on this, because it's the burlap, we do need to add a lot of adhesives. I suggest, as always, that you use these Technique Tuesdays as a starting point, places to start with, and then you start to investigate and see what works best for you. So now I'm going to come in on this side and add the color, and this time I'm going to come in with a burnt umber. I love these two colors together. We don't need a lot. And like before, we want to find a nice flat surface for this to dry on. So I thought we could do a smaller piece using this cheesecloth that I have left. And using some of the distress sprays. I haven't tried them, and I want to see what we end up with.
So again, we're going to do the same sandwich that we've been doing. So we'll get that laid down, and then we'll start adding color.
All right. So now while that's all nice and wet, we're gonna come in with some Distress Oxide spray and some Distress Spray stains and see what happens.
So like I said, I've come in with the Distress Oxide and some of the spray stains, and these are going to be in Rustic Wilderness, Bundled Sage, Forest Moss, and a little bit of Mowed Lawn. And I'll have all that listed down below. Once I get that color down and kind of moved it around a little bit, I am going to come in with some tissue paper here and just pick up any of the color that's left on the plastic. And this is another good technique to use with tissue, is when you have leftover color that you don't want to waste, grab some tissue, scrunch it up and dip it in, and then re-scrunch it and dip it in and open it up and let it dry. You get such goodness.
Okay, we are going to let this dry naturally, and when I come back I will show you how to get it up off of these sheets.
So while those are drying, we're going to come in with some tissue and do some more of that pick up work, picking up excess color with the tissue to create additional fodder out of that tissue.
This time I'm going to come in with some India inks. So I have a tangerine, a crimson, and a turquoise. I'm going to go in, instead of the tangerine, I'm going to come in with this golden yellow. It's a beautiful color, and I think it'll mix really fun with this crimson. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do this on the brown and the white just to see. So you want to take your tissue and just crumple it up. And if you don't like getting your fingers dirty, this is the time to put your gloves on. And I'm going to come in with some of this crimson. Put some drops down. And then some of this golden yellow. And I'm going to come in with a little bit of water. Okay, and then we're just going to start, get some air in there, and just going to come in and kind of just turn it and dip it. And then come over to the yellow and get some up there and put it to the side. And then I'm going to do the same with this back color. Kind of fluff it up a little bit and come in and soak up some of the crimson. And then come over and soak up some of the golden yellow. Now that brown tissue is very thin. It's thinner than this white is. This white seems to be really an art and crafts quality tissue. Now we could either come in here and soak up some more. I'm going to leave it where it's at, and I'm going to come in with this turquoise. And get some water added to that. And then come back in. I'm going to re-scrunch this a little bit, taking care to be gentle with the wet areas. I don't want to really rip it too much. And then kind of fold it out a little bit so get some of that turquoise in a little deeper. And then I'm going to open this up using care, because where it's wet it's going to be thin. Kind of fluff it out, and then I'm going to place this to dry on another one of these sheets. So I'm just going to let this go to the side and leave it wrinkled and let it dry. And then I'm going to come back in and rewrap this a little bit. Pick up some of that turquoise. And then you can see where I've ripped it a bit. And lay that out to dry. And I'm going to continue on using what I have left here. All right, so it's not even 24 hours later, and these are completely dry. They're still on the plate. And so they may be wet on the inside between here, and if so, we're just going to remove them and turn them over and let them dry. So you want to grab them under the last layer, which in this case is the tissue. And because of this slick surface, it just peels right off. And so I do see, oh no, that maybe... So that must be some of the Dina Wakley. Oh no, it's on the other side, never mind. So if you get to a sticky part, just come in here and kind of tease it. And as you can see on this one, because of the cheesecloth, you can see right through and see the color come through either side. And again, this rips real easy because it's the cheesecloth and on the tissue, but it does have a lot of strength. So it can be used for so many different things. So here is the piece of tissue that we put the burlap on. And as you remember, we put color on half of one side. I kind of got carried away, and then on the other side I put paint here. Now because the burlap is so dark in color, we really see the white. Let me show you the other piece. On this piece, I recall really spreading out that burlap and getting big holes in there. And then this was a piece of tissue that was printed. So that's the difference here. And so we just want to make sure we grab that tissue. And that came off super easy. And you can see that glossy side because of what's against this. But again, really pliable, really fun to use this tissue fabric for all different kinds of purposes. And like I said, I'll show you a little snippet of me using this as part of a focal point. So this is the Distress Oxides with the cheesecloth and the tissue. And this, I will like the tissue before that I used the distress stains on. This one, nope, I thought it was going to be a little wet there. It is right here. So we'll just come from a different angle. I will spray this with, so it's still a little wet here. Sometimes if you come at it from a different angle, you'll have better luck. So we did have some pull up there. It's not too wet. And this will peel really easily off your plastic. It's wet, but it's not like sopping wet. So anyways, so this, what I would suggest, if you use it this way, you're not gonna get a lot of that color reconstituting, because this is water soluble product that we put on the cheesecloth. So what you can do is spray it like I did the other tissue with some matte fixative. It's not going to keep it from, if you put a lot of water, it's still going to bleed out. But matte fixative will make it a little bit more workable. So if you take care in using it, you should be able to get away with adding a little bit of adhesive to it or whatever you're doing. But my goodness, that is going to be a lot of fun to use in future collage things. All right, so we have created some tissue collage material using archival ink and some foam stamps. These are foam stamps with acrylic paint. This is homemade foam stamps, and I made one using archival ink. And then we, on this one, we used archival ink, but we added distress oxide sprays. And then here we layered up some fabric along with the tissue and color and created these pieces. This is with the glossy sprays by Ranger and the tissue paper and gauze. And here's that same thing, but instead of adding color, we added rice paper to the mix. And here we did the gauze and we added distress spray stains to it to get this kind of look. And then this is the tissue with burlap. So, and this is with acrylic paint, and then this was done with a piece of printed tissue. And then this is printed tissue with muslin as our fabric source. And then this is scrap tissue along with a sheet as our fabric. And then we crumpled up the tissue and dipped it into liquids. This is dipped into distress spray stains. This is, these three here are all India inks. And these are subtle, but these are done with the alcohol ink sprays. So we really got a variety to use in our collage.
I wanted you to also see a couple clips of how I use that burlap tissue. And I wanted to also take the time to say thank you so much for hanging in there. I know this was a long Technique Tuesday, but I really had so much I wanted to share with you. Thank you so much for coming along. If you haven't subscribed, please think about doing so.